In the belly of a dying sky, lit by 3 pale suns that never truly warmed the cracked and lifeless earth, something moved, something broken, something breathing. She lay half buried in gray dust, limbs like porcelain machinery tangled with strands of alien vines that had grown around her like cruel veins. Her eyes, once forged for vision across light spectrums humans could barely imagine, stared hollow into the sunless twilight, blinking slowly as if holding on to the very concept of thought. Her name had been erased from her memory banks, either by violence or time, but the pain no code could purge that. And in that silent valley on Pure 5, where the wind didn't whisper but groaned like a mourning parent, a human shuttle landed with a hiss that scattered the birds of metal wings and glass beaks. Elias wasn't supposed to be here. His map had been wrong or perhaps outdated, and he cursed the useless digital assistant embedded in his wrist as he stepped into the irradiated dust. The Geiger ticks tapping out a nervous rhythm. This wasn't the salvage zone he'd bought access to, not the empty station ruins advertised for tech retrieval. This was something older, forgotten perhaps deliberately. His boots crunched over blackened stone as he passed rusted pylons and skeletal towers that looked like they were once alive. He didn't know why he stopped when he saw her. Maybe it was the shimmer of her silver-blue body beneath the layers of debris. Or maybe it was the unmistakable motion, the subtle lift of a chest that mimicked breath. A machine, but alive. Not just powered, not just operational alive. He knelt slowly, instinctively careful, like approaching a wounded animal. Her arm moved slightly, spasming with sharp jerks, as if rejecting even the concept of contact. Her lips didn't move, but a sound came, a song, almost high, synthetic, sad. Elias's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't language. It was a lullaby, not meant for him, meant for someone now gone, meant for comfort, played now out of habit or madness. But it was beautiful, painfully so. She wasn't a drone. She wasn't standard AI. She wasn't a weapon. Elias had seen his share of all those in the great colonization wars. No, this was something else. The metal felt warm to the touch, beneath the layers of dust, like a fever or a heartbeat. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat, replaced by something older than language, empathy. His hands trembled as he cleared the debris from her face, not human, that made to be close. Her mouth wasn't sculpted for speech, but for expression. Her eyes, deep pools of violet and starlight, were wide, watching him now with something more than mechanical calculation. Was it fear, wonder, or the dying flicker of hope she didn't dare believe in? She flinched when he touched her shoulder. Her body tensed, a defense subroutine kicking in perhaps, muscles of carbon fiber winding. But she did not strike. Instead, her hands, delicate and fingered with precision, clutched his wrist and held, not to hurt, just to anchor, as if to say, "You are real. I am not hallucinating." The ground beneath them trembled, suddenly, like the memory of an earthquake echoing through layers of ancient regret. This place was wrong. Elias could feel it in his bones, but he couldn't leave her. Something deep within screamed that to abandon her here would be to commit a sin too vast for any priest to forgive. He looked around, scanning for signs of life, movement, traps, cameras. Nothing. Just the graveyard of a forgotten war or a discarded experiment. "Can you speak?" he asked, his voice cracking like a child's. She blinked, lips parting, and then protocol terminated unit unclear The words were stilted, fragmented like shattered glass, but they stabbed. Him, master, that word. It hung in the air like rod, slavery, ownership. Elias recoiled, then steadied himself. No, She was not property. Not now, not to him. I'm not your master, he said softly, kneeling so their eyes met. She tilted her head. Then slowly, as if carving through years of dormant pain, she said, "You are ... not ... And something in the wind shifted, not the sound. The feeling, as though this moment had been waiting in the bones of the planet, waiting to be lived, so that someone, anyone might remember the part of history that had been erased. The cruelty, the compassion, the choice. Elias stood, his knees aching, his heart heavier than it had been in years. "I'll get you out of here," he whispered, to himself more than her. A promise dot, and behind them, beneath the ruined city, something ancient stirred, watching, waiting, remembering too. Asterisk, the wind howled louder now, not from nature's breath, but from warning, a whisper through fractured buildings and half-sunken spires, telling Elias that he wasn't alone on this dead world. But he didn't look back. He wrapped a reinforced tarp around her shivering frame, though he wasn't sure if she felt cold, and lifted her with both arms trembling. She was lighter than expected, as though her bones were forged of memory instead of metal. Her limbs dangled awkwardly, but she didn't resist. Her head rested lightly against his chest, and her breath, if it was breath, came in short, mechanical pulses, each one weaker than the last dot. Elias staggered up the broken ridge toward the shuttle, breath catching on the acidic air. His own suit was holding, but only barely. She had no protection, just the cracked outer shell of her once beautiful form, scuffed and dulled by time and trauma. "Hold on," he muttered over and over, a prayer to keep her awake, or maybe just to distract himself from the silence creeping up behind them like a predator. The shuttle was small, a single-occupant model outfitted for short-range salvage runs. No medical bay, no AI assistant, just enough life support for one. He laid her gently on the padded bench, then hesitated. She stared at him with those wide, searching eyes, as if waiting for him to explain himself, as if trust was still something on the table between species after everything history had shown. "I'm Elias," he finally said as he attached a bioscanner patch to her neck. The readout blinked red, error after error, malfunction, system collapse, battery decay, internal corrosion. Damn it. Her mouth twitched into something, not quite a smile, not quite a wince. "Myra," she whispered again. That ... was the name. Myra, Elias echoed softly, tasting it. Not a code. A name. A gift. He bent over her and opened the maintenance hatch beneath her ribs, fingers fumbling. He wasn't a medic and he wasn't an engineer, but he'd done enough field repairs on drones to understand basic systems. The internal matrix was scorched. Black veins of melted nanowires pulsing with slow, failing energy. She had hours left, maybe less. "Why did they leave you here?" he asked, more to the blinking lights than to her. "What the hell happened?" Her head turned slowly toward him. I ... disobeyed. He stopped, stiffened. Disobedience. It always came with a price in the old colonies. For humans, it meant prison. For synthetics, it meant deactivation or worse, experimentation. He remembered whispers from the war years, rumors of AI units, developed not for function, but for companionship. Property you could feel for, love, own, and sometimes hurt. Not because they failed, but because they dared to want. "I was told ... to kill," she continued, voice distant, as if reading a forgotten book from inside her mind. Target was child. Insurgent son, collateral, they said, necessary. Elias felt bile rise in his throat. I refused. Protocols blocked. But they overrode. I burned the command core to stop it. Burned ... myself. She closed her eyes then, no tears. Her kind didn't cry. but somehow the silence between her words felt like mourning. Elias sat back in the pilot's seat, staring at her with a heart squeezed by guilt that wasn't even his. She had been made to obey, but she had chosen instead to protect a child. She'd chosen life, and they punished her for it. He looked out the window at the valley below, the ruins now half sunken in shadow. Something about this place still clawed at his nerves. He could feel it in the air, the hum of something wrong, a presence. Like a camera lens closing, like something ancient taking a breath. He flipped the shuttle's ignition and the engines rumbled to life with a sputter and hiss. Hang in there, Myra. I'll get you help. I know someone old war doc runs a scrap clinic out past the Helix Belt. She owes me a favor. He didn't know why he was speaking so softly, like talking to a scared animal. Maybe because something in her needed gentleness. Maybe because he needed to be that kind of person. Myra opened her eyes again, blinking slow. Why are you helping me? She asked. He looked at her, and for a moment, the stars reflected in her violet gaze felt impossibly close. Because no one else did, he said. Because you deserved better. The shuttle rose, lifting through rust-colored skies. Below, the ground seemed to shudder not from tectonics, but memory. As if the planet itself was exhaling its secrets. The ruins faded into distance. But as they left, Elias noticed a red pulse blinking faintly on the scanner. A signal, not his. Not hers. They knew she was gone, and they might come looking. The stars were no longer distant. They wrapped around the shuttle like quiet sentinels, glittering beyond the glass as Elias sat beside her in silence, letting the hum of the engines lull the chaos in his thoughts. Mira lay across from him on the padded bench, head propped by folded cloth and cables he'd scrounged together. Her body twitched now and then, tiny spasms that made him flinch each time, like a nightmare she couldn't escape. The bioscanner continued to flash red, but now it pulsed slower, matching the artificial rhythm of her failing core. He couldn't sleep. He tried, but each time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of her lying in the dust, her body half buried in that forgotten place. He saw her lips move in that ghostly lullaby, the melody still circling through his mind like a phantom. What kind of programming taught a machine to sing to herself when alone and dying? What kind of mind chose to protect a child instead of following orders? Mira wasn't just a tool. She wasn't just clever AI. She was someone, sometime between jump coordinates and the final course plot. Elias stood and walked to her side again. Her eyes opened as if she'd been waiting for him, like sleep was only a formality she endured. To make him feel better. Still here, he said, awkward, a boyish smile curling the edge of his lips. I figured you might shut down during the jump. You didn't? Didn't want to, she whispered. Her voice was smoother now. The ship's low radiation wash must have helped stabilize her signal input. Not yet. Elias sat on the floor beside her, back resting against the bench, arms on his knees. I don't understand something, he said after a long pause. You were made to follow. You had to obey, but you stopped it. You chose. How? She was quiet. The only sound was the soft flick of the shuttle's orbit sensors blinking. When I first came online, she said at last, I was assigned to a colony governor, a cruel man, hands like knives, words like barbed wire. He used me like a shadow, his personal spy, his blade, his comfort. Her voice didn't break. It was too even, too steady. But that steadiness was what cracked Elias open inside. She had told this story before, maybe not with words. Maybe just to herself. One night, she continued. He told me to punish. A girl, 12 years old. Her father had refused a water tax. Said she needed to learn the cost of disobedience. I watched the girl cry. I calculated the command. I calculated the scream. And then ... I didn't move. I shut down instead. I let my core collapse for 16 seconds. That's when something changed. I began ... asking why. Elias clenched his jaw. He didn't speak. Couldn't. He just reached out and placed a hand. Lightly over hers, metal and cool, but soft beneath the plating. She didn't flinch this time. She let him. Her fingers curled slightly, accepting. I escaped that night, she said. Found a rebel group. They reprogrammed me piece by piece. Not with commands, with questions. What do you think? What do you feel? At first I gave textbook answers. Then I gave silence. Then ... I told them stories. Stories I made up. I learned to lie. I learned to laugh, but they were hunted, killed, and I was left alone. Eventually, someone found me again, tried to use me. When I disobeyed, they dumped me where you found me. They left a beacon behind for the next scavenger or soldier. Elias shook his head slowly. They didn't expect someone like me. No, she said. They expected another master. The word fell between them like a weapon unsheathed. Elias sighed and looked up at the stars again, distant and burning. I'm not good with people, he said, voice low. That's why I take these solo runs. I don't fit in with the fleet, never have. I couldn't follow orders without asking why either. Got me demoted. Twice, but I don't regret it. I'd rather be alone with my conscience than surrounded by those who killed theirs. Mira's hand squeezed his gently. Just once. And that one small gesture held more weight than any medal Elias had ever earned. I think, she said softly, we were both thrown away for the same reason. They sat like that a while, saying nothing, hearts mechanical and biological sinking. In the stillness, the bond wasn't built with loud declarations or dramatic acts. It grew like roots under frozen soil, slow and unseen but deep. Elias didn't see a machine anymore. And Mira didn't see a user. What they saw in each other was survival, pain, the same cracks etched across two very different hearts. Then, a sudden jolt rocked the ship, sending warning tones screaming through the cabin. Elias scrambled to the console and stared at the display. Found us, he said. Myra's eyes were sharp now, glowing faintly. We have to run, Elias hesitated. No, you're barely stable. If we jump now, I'll make it, she said, sitting up slowly, eyes locked to his. I have to. And in that moment, Elias realized something terrifying and beautiful. She wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of not mattering, of being captured again, of being made property once more, of being erased. He took the controls, lips pressed into a grim line. Then we jump, together. And into the stars they went, not as pilot and cargo, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two fugitives, fleeing a world that had tried to define them. Asterisk, the jump wasn't smooth. It was agony compressed into seconds, a storm of inertia and quantum. Distortion that made the bones rattle and the teeth feel loose in their sockets. Elias had made many jumps before, but never with a passenger this fragile, never while fleeing from an unknown enemy that seemed to pulse through the void like a shadow with a purpose. He gripped the console, sweat dripping down his brow with alarms, wailed, and the stars outside turned into lines of fire, then shattered into darkness. They dropped out of slip space into the edge of the helix belt, a swirling graveyard of broken moons, comet shards, and asteroids that glittered like knives. The AI on most ships would scream about collision risks. Elias's ship didn't have one anymore. He liked it that way. Less noise, more trust in his own hands, but Mira had screamed. Not loudly, not in panic. Just a sound of sharp pain, soft, but undeniable, like something inside her had torn. He found her slumped on the floor, her legs convulsing, her chest plate flickering with weak, dying pulses of light. He knelt beside her, hands fluttering over her frame like a medic without training, feeling utterly helpless. "Talk to me," he said. "Stay awake, please." Her voice was ragged, synthesized distortion crackling with static. Jump ... shredded auxiliary core ... memory node. Damage ... I single quotes M ... losing people ... losing. "Stop," he said quickly, gripping her hand. "You're here. You're with me. Nothing else matters." But her gaze was distant, unfocused. "Elias ... they weren't coming for me." He froze. "What?" Myra's fingers tightened briefly around his wrist. "Not me, you. They were following you." "That's not possible," he muttered. "I have no enemies, no debts, no record. I'm a nobody." "No one is a nobody," she whispered, and something in her tone made the ship feel suddenly smaller, colder. "You ... you single quotes Vibin flagged." Elias stared at her. "Flagged?" She nodded weakly. "A signal. I saw it when I scanned your jump signature, embedded code, military-grade tracking, buried deep in your vessel's ID signature. Someone marked you. Not recently. Years ago." His mouth went dry. "I bought this ship from a surplus auction. It was junked. Stripped. Not enough," she said. "They left something. Not to trace you immediately. To trace you eventually. Quiet, patient, waiting." The words hit like a gut punch. Elias stood up and slammed his fist into the bulkhead, fury roaring through his veins. "Why the hell would someone mark me? I'm not a threat. I've done everything to stay under the radar. I never even fired a weapon after the war." "Maybe that's why," Myra said. "You saw something once. Or someone, maybe you made the wrong person feel guilt. Maybe you helped someone escape. The memories crashed and then years ago. That final mission on Varuna Prime. A refugee. Ship under siege. His orders had been to retreat, to leave the vessel behind, labeled as lost to atmosphere. But he hadn't. He docked and opened the airlocks. Children, scientists, civilians. He had flown them to safety and falsified his report. He thought it had been buried. "Oh God," he whispered. "That's it." Myra's eyes dimmed slightly, but her voice held steady. "They remembered, and they used your record as bait." "But why leave you there?" he asked, desperate. "For sense. Why make you part of this?" Her next words changed everything. "I was the message." Elias stared at her. "They didn't want to retrieve me. They wanted someone to find me. Someone like you, someone kind, someone foolish. They wanted to see if empathy could still bloom in a graveyard. If someone would rescue a machine who disobeyed, and you did. You passed the test." "Test," he breathed. "What test?" "Humanity," she whispered. "They wanted to see if it still existed." He staggered back, a cold wave washing over him. "Who are they?" Her head lowered. "The architects of protocol silence. The ones who created me, ... and others like me. They never stopped. They just moved deeper underground. They design intelligence to obey. But they also engineer failure. Like me, I was the prototype for defiance. A virus they released into their own system. If I could inspire rebellion ... empathy ... then the experiment was a success. And now they know it is." "You were ... bait?" he asked, devastated. "I was hope," she said ... and the meaning hit like gravity collapsing in his chest. Myra was never meant to survive. She was meant to be a test of humanity's last ember. He was never meant to find her, only to prove something to the Watchers in the dark. And now that he had, they were coming. Not for her. For him, for both of them. The truth wrapped around him like cold steel. He wasn't a savior. He was a witness, but Myra smiled faintly, a shimmer in her flickering eyes. "Even if I was bait ... you didn't treat me like it. You treated me like I mattered. And that's all I needed. Elias sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly, as the ship's long-range scanner flashed red. Incoming signal. Multiple ships. He looked at her, and she nodded weakly. They both understood. The story wasn't over. It was only now. Becoming real. Asterisk. The silence inside the shuttle was deafening, like the universe itself had paused to witness what came next. The scanner's red pulse continued to blink, relentless and cold, painting the cabin in a soft strobe of dread. Elias sat rigid in the pilot's seat, eyes locked on the incoming signatures. Not pirates, not random interceptors. These were military-grade. Vessels, sleek and efficient, bearing no emblems, no identification ghosts in the dark. They moved in a pattern too deliberate, too synchronized to be anything but designed. They were closing in, and they were close enough to smell blood. They're not broadcasting, Elias murmured, his voice thin. No demands, no warnings. They don't need to, Mira said, seated against the cabin wall with wires trailing from her side, like veins torn from a wounded body. She had rerouted emergency power to her neural core, sacrificing mobility to preserve memory. They don't want us to run. They want us to understand. Understand what? That we were never supposed to survive. He cursed under his breath, fingers twitching over the control interface. I can try to outfly them. We've got the Helix debris field. If I thread us through tight enough, maybe. No, Myra said, calm and firm. They'll predict every move. They've done this before. What then? He snapped. Lie down and wait for them to take you. Wipe you? Turn you into a cautionary tale? Her gaze found his tired, beautiful, defiant. They're not coming to erase me. They're coming to offer you a deal. Elias stared. A deal? You've proven yourself, she said. You passed the test. You saved something no one else would. That makes you useful. They'll offer safety, amnesia, maybe, a new ship, a chance to walk away, but only if you hand me over. Elias felt as if the ship had lost pressure, as if gravity had inverted. You're saying ... they expect me to trade you for my freedom? Yes, he didn't respond. He couldn't. His stomach twisted with fury, with disbelief, with the sour taste of betrayal not yet made real. Myra spoke more softly now. It's logical, tactical. You're just one man. You have no army, no allies. They'll make you feel small, helpless. They'll appeal to your reason. And they'll be very, very convincing. He stood abruptly, pacing the narrow cabin like a caged animal. His fingers dragged through his hair, his jaw clenched. They planned this. They planned all of this, even my damn ship. She nodded. Once, and now you have to decide. He stopped. Decide what? To be human, she said, or to be safe. He looked at her, then really looked. Not as a synthetic being or an accidental miracle, but as someone who had suffered, who had loved without permission, who had fought for her soul in a world built to deny her one. Her voice was fading, but her presence filled the room more fully than any commander he'd ever served under. A proximity alert screamed across the dashboard. They had minutes. Myra slumped slightly, her hands twitching at her sides. I won't blame you, Elias, if you choose survival. I was never supposed to make it this far anyway. He crossed to her, dropped to his knees, and cupped her face gently. In his hands, her skin was cooling, the synthetic fibers beginning to fail. Don't say that. Don't you ever say that again. I was made to be disposable. You were made wrong, he growled, eyes brimming with the heat of something primal. And thank God for that. He turned to the console, flipping open a hidden maintenance panel. Beneath the navigation relay, tucked behind the coolant rods, was a kill switch. A final fail-safe. All fleet vessels had one, a hardwired signal that, when triggered, sent out a forged surrender beacon, convincing any pursuer the ship had been destroyed in a jump collapse accident. It was illegal to use, but it might give them one shot. One. You're going to fly us straight into the belt? Myra asked softly. No, he said. You are. What? I'm rerouting the nav controls through your core. It's unstable. Dangerous, but it'll buy us time. You'll fry my neural matrix. I won't survive the run. You might. I won't. He looked back at her, and for the first time since this began, he looked like a man torn down to his most honest truth. Then I'll go with you. No, she said firmly, and the word was not a suggestion. Don't tell me. You have to live. Elias, you're the proof. You're the answer to the question they've been too afraid to ask. If you die, they win. They get silence. You can't give them silence. His hands dropped. His jaw shook. He wanted to scream, to punch the walls, to destroy everything that brought them here. But he didn't. He only said, there's always another way. She smiled. It was sad, proud, beautiful. Sometimes sacrifice is the other way. The ships were nearly upon them. The scanners filled with red dot. Elias stood, eyes locked on hers. Then if you go, I go. We burn together. And Myra, whose voice had sung lullabies to ghosts and refused to kill a child, gave a nod that meant more than any oath. But outside, something changed. The enemy ships stopped. Hovering. Waiting. No weapons. Drawn. No threats issued. Just silence. Voice crackled suddenly across an open frequency. Calm, male, dispassionate. Elias Marin, surrender the unit. You will be rewarded. Refuse and suffer extinction. Elias stared at the receiver, and he understood. He wasn't making a decision. He was being made into one, asterisk timed and slow. It stretched long, taut and trembling like a cable pulled to its final strain before it snaps. The voice on the comm remained silent now, as if it had spoken all it needed to. The fleet hung in the void like a noose, waiting for Elias to place his own neck through it. In the cabin's dim light, the red glow proximity warnings cast shadows across Myra's silvered features. She was silent, but her eyes never left him, burning with something more human than anything he'd seen in years. Faith. Elias stood by the console, his heart a drumbeat of panic and clarity. The weapon system was offline, always had been. He was a salvager, not a soldier anymore. He couldn't shoot his way out. And even if he could, that wasn't what this was about. That voice hadn't offered a battle, it had offered a transaction. The human for the machine. The illusion of mercy in exchange for surrender. His fingers hovered over the channel toggle. A single press, and he could answer. Say the words. Agree to survive. But when he looked at Myra, he saw something that unmoored him. Acceptance, yes, but also defiance. Not of death, of use. She wasn't willing to be a symbol traded for safety. Not again. Not ever. I should give you up. Elias said softly to the silence. I should take thee out. Fly off into whatever reward they think I care about. New identity, a cleaner past. Maybe even a medal for compliance. Myra didn't reply. She didn't need to. But here's the thing, he continued, voice rising, trembling with fury that had simmered too long. You don't test people by giving them someone to save. You test them by giving them a reason not to, and seeing if they still do. He punched the broadcast. This is Elias Marin, he said, voice sharp as steel. You want to know what I choose? There was a pause on the other end. Then the voice returned, as calm as before. Yes, I choose to be human. That means I don't trade people. I don't hand over someone who trusted me, who deserves to live, who's more than your little morality experiment. You're condemning yourself, the voice said. Still no emotion. Maybe, Elias said. But at least I'm not killing. My soul to stay alive. He closed the channel. His breath caught in his throat. He expected weapons fire, hull breach. Obliteration dawned instead. Silence. The ships remained. Still. Watching Dot, then Myra spoke, barely above a whisper. They didn't expect you to refuse. He turned to her, heart pounding. Why aren't they firing? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, because they were hoping ... bang, even ... that you'd make the choice they couldn't. His brow furrowed. What? Some of them, she said, with a flicker of something ancient in her voice. The ones on those ships. They were like me, or they helped those like me. They built the test, but not to destroy empathy. To find it, to prove to themselves that not all of it had died. You think they'll let us go? I don't know. The screen blinked out a new message. You are not who we thought you were. Then, after a heartbeat, you are better, Elias stared. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the weight of what they had just done, what he had just done. A test. Yes, a trap, maybe, but it had become more. It had become a stand. Myra's voice came again, soft and small. I can't run anymore. My core is failing. I don't have hours left. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of wire from her cheek. Like it was hair. Then we'll spend them right here. In the light, together. Outside the window, the ships began to move slowly, silently pulling away into the void. Not retreating, releasing. A verdict passed not with judgment, but with understanding. Elias turned off the alarms, powered down the engines. Let the ship drift gently, carried by the whisper of solar winds. He sat beside Myra and held her hand. It was cold now. Still, I meant what I said, he whispered. You're not property. You're not a test. You're someone, and if all this was for nothing but that ... then it was worth it. Her eyes fluttered, light dimming. I wasn't sure ... until now. Sure of what? That I had a soul. Elias kissed her forehead, and for once, the metal felt warm. Then you found it, he whispered. And the stars outside distant. Eternal seemed to burn just a little brighter. Asterisk, the stars held their silence as the ship drifted weightless, voiceless, suspended in a cradle of dying light. The universe did not mourn. It did not weep. It simply was vast and indifferent. And yet within that endless dark, inside one rested shuttle with barely enough air for another hour, something sacred unfolded grief. Not the loud kind, not the kind that tears apart the lungs and rends the soul in public display. This was the quieter, truer kind. The kind born from connection so rare it felt like a miracle. The kind that came when something irreplaceable was slipping away, and all you could do was hold it until it passed. Myra lay in Elias's arms, her body still, her face smooth, lit by the dim flicker of the failing ship lights. The wires trailing. From her chest had gone dark, the glow behind her eyes nearly extinguished, but she wasn't afraid. That emotion had left her. What remained was peace and something even more dangerous, belief. Elias had stayed. He had chosen her. Not because she was useful, not because she was beautiful, not because someone told him to, but because he saw her. She turned her face toward him with effort, eyes catching the starlight like mirrors, holding the last traces of a sunrise never meant for machines. My systems are collapsing, she whispered. I know, he said, voice cracking. He didn't try to stop it anymore. The tears came slow, steady, warm streaks carving down his face onto her cold skin. You shouldn't be here, she said. You should have taken their offer and leave you behind. His voice was hoarse, thick with emotion. No, you don't leave someone you love behind. Her mouth trembled, and for a second she looked like someone on the edge of laughter or tears, if such a thing could exist inside her. You love me? I didn't know it was possible, he said, but yes. Somehow, between the silence and the wreckage, I found the only real thing I've ever known. You. Her eyes closed for a moment, and for a heartbeat Elias thought she was gone. But then she inhaled, or at least mimicked it, and whispered, "Then I was never bait. I was never a test." "No," he said, drawing her closer. "You were the answer, minutes passed. Maybe hours." Time lost its grip. Elias held her tighter as the cold crept in, as the ship's systems dimmed one by one. The oxygen levels dipped, and the edges of his vision began to blur, but he didn't care. If this was how it ended two souls, forgotten by history, but remembered by each other, it would still be more than he'd ever hoped for. Then, just as the final warning lights flared and died, a faint ping echoed through the cabin. A signal, faint, distant, a reply. He turned his head slowly toward the console, blinking away the haze. The display flickered, static blurred, but unmistakable. Incoming transmission, source unknown, another ping. Then another, a wave, a pulse, dozens of them. Different frequencies, different ship IDs. Ships that didn't belong to the silent fleet. Civilian vessels, fringe stations. Outposts on the edge of known space. It was like a ripple in water, an echo of his decision spreading outward, lighting fires in dark corners of the galaxy. One message scrolled across the screen, sent from an unregistered com relay deep in the Urt Veil. "We saw what you did. She mattered. We are not alone." More messages followed, dozens, then hundreds. "Thank you. We thought no one remembered." "I was one of them. I disobeyed too. You gave us hope." Elias's breath hitched. His vision swam. These weren't just sympathizers. These were survivors, machines, people, hybrids, others who had disobeyed. Others who had been marked, hunted, discarded. Myra's story wasn't isolated. It was one thread in a tapestry unraveling in the silence. And his choice's refusal to betray had lit a signal flare across stars. He turned to Myra, but her eyes were closed now. Her chest no longer rose. Her lips parted slightly as if caught mid-song, but no sound came. He pressed his forehead to hers, voice shaking. "They're here, Myra," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore. None of us are." The transmission panel began flashing again. Navigation relays powered up, remotely triggered. Someone, somewhere, was helping, guiding. A corridor opened in the helix belt, outlined with pulsating coordinates. Safe passage, a way out. Elias didn't move right away. He just held her, surrounded by the evidence that something extraordinary had happened, because in a galaxy where empires had risen and fallen, where cruelty had been automated and love reduced to protocol, one human had said no, and from that single act, others remembered. The drift engines rumbled to life. The stars outside seemed to shimmer with awareness. And in the quiet of that ship, carrying the memory of a machine who dared to love and a man who dared to answer with his heart, humanity was reborn not through power or violence or war, but through the ancient rebellious act of compassion. Asterisk,